Hello, friend, and welcome back to my studio. Now, I don't know about you, but I am very sensitive to the amount of hopeless doom around me. I read a ton of books, and increasingly, the more I learn, the more depressing the world looks. Like, I just finished a book about being tired all the time, and the honest solution was to ditch all the advancements society has made with food and go back to eating a 90% fresh vegetable diet with nothing processed, no pesticides, no plastic containers, no red 40, no corn syrup, and no sugar. I learned that sugar feeds the bad gut bacteria and fiber feed the good gut bacteria, and that our bodies are basically just habitats for our microbiome, so when the gut is out of whack, the whole body is. But I can't afford to do that. And even if I could, I'd only be saving myself. It's like society advanced too far, and now everything we have is bad for us, and you have to spend a shitload of money to get around it. While I go on about just how bad this current life is for us, I'll be working on finishing this painting. If you like my art, please subscribe to see how it turns out, and join my newsletter to hear when I put it up for sale. Now, back to the story. Our food chain is terrible. The food we put into our bodies is barely recognized as food, the ecological footprint of our food sucks, the dirt we grow food in is less nutrient rich, and the whole thing should all around be thrown out and replaced with local community farms. Our technology was made to help us, but it makes us more anxious and depressed than ever, with more chronic sleep problems and loneliness of epidemic proportions. Our work systems suck. No one can afford anything but the basics after 40 hours of work, which was a number invented back when household and work duties were divided, but now most individuals do both, and our free time gets sucked into the next terrible one-season Netflix show, or just a mindless TikTok scroll. The medical systems are screwed, the financial system's constantly collapsing under its own weight, and overall, it feels like none of the progress we've made has been good progress. It's starting to feel like being a hunter-gatherer society is preferable to being like this one. And on top of all that, we have the climate crisis and the current political landscape that's impossible to make progress in. It all feels like we're a generation or two away from oblivion, and that gets me real down. A lot of the time. I do want to introduce one new idea into all of this, though. It's something helpful for me to think about the time that I'm living in more along the lines of how history unfolds. Like, I could have lived in the 1800s, I could have been in biblical times, I could have existed during the World Wars, I could have been born 200 years from now, but I wasn't, and I never will be. When I was born was now, and this is one of the most important times in all of human history. We are facing overwhelming mass threats against our kind that we've never faced before, and some threats that we're just still fighting. And if none of us have hope for change, then nothing will get better. I read The Jungle a while back, and it was surprisingly inspirational to read about old labor laws that unionizing and public passion helped to change. If all the people who lived through the terror of the meatpacking industry in the early 1900s never believed things would change, they literally just wouldn't have. Big companies would have kept getting away with using laborers as disposable goods to be used up as efficiently as possible. But so many people fought together and made changes so they could spend time with their families and not get fired for an injury, even to get compensation for injuries on the job. I think that if we're able to imagine more for ourselves, we can achieve it. I heard some quote along the lines of change at the government level comes too late, at the individual level it's not enough, but at a community level it transforms. I feel so caught up in waiting for the government to change things, and the dread that it never could. I make some changes at an individual level, but nothing really feels significant, only things that make me feel like I'm doing something. I'm ready for change at a community level. A couple of passionate people making a different kind of life for their communities. Growing gardens instead of lawns. Walking and carpooling to work. Having, community Netflix accounts. And kids that play on the streets more than sitting in front of screens. My personal belief is that change won't happen as long as the screen time we societally have stays this high. I don't think people have the time to think about anything. They just react through their day until they're exhausted and go on screens to escape the exhaustion, not knowing that their little dopamine cycles are keeping them exhausted beyond doing anything else with their free time. If you're old enough, do you remember daydreaming or doodling in school? Do you remember being so bored that you'd do ridiculous, embarrassing things? Trying out new things out of a lack of something else to do? Talking to your friends on the landline? Seeing your friends in person, and if you have something to say to them, having to remember it until the next time you saw them? I think we've lost the free space that we need in our own heads to even fathom a life that looks different than the life we collectively live. I think that if today, this very moment, every person took every phone and smashed it with a hammer or drowned it or put it under the tires of their car, I think society would improve for that. I think it would take some adjusting, sure, but the room in everyone's lives just being freed up completely would have to do good. I have to believe that. Just like I have to believe that I live now for a reason. That reason is certainly not to disappoint the future generation and die a slow death of unremarkable moments and an absurd number of TikToks watched. In this generation, the first generation to see the effects of climate change and the last one who has a chance to do anything about it, I think we can do so much group good just as soon as we start actually believing it's possible. Want to know some of the good things that have changed in the last 100 years? Here's a list. The labor movement fought for better wages, reasonable hours, safer working conditions. They stopped child labor. They give health benefits and provide aid to workers who were injured or retired. The women's movement freed women from being the legal property of their husbands and gave them the right to vote, the right to have their own bank accounts, the right to pursue any job, and worked against social structures that are in place that keep women in a state of submission. The LGBT movement worked to destigmatize queerness and even made it legal to marry your partner in every state. The disability rights movement made accessibility more of a priority and allowed disabled people to work any job. The racial justice movement broke down race barriers and continues to work against racism in everyday life. I'm absolutely certain that every movement felt impossible, that most people could not see the vision of hope that these movements fought for. But here we are, a confused society, surely, but a significantly fairer one. We did make progress in the last 100 years, and maybe we did it so that we, this generation here, can handle this. We really have everything we need. We just have too many distractions to see it. All we need to do is imagine that change is possible and act like it. Not just you personally, not just the government, but you and your neighbors and friends and parents and siblings. As a community, we can take every challenge and get to somewhere better than this. Margaret Mead said, "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has." That's all for this week. If you're still here, go ahead and like this video, or at least subscribe so you see my next ones. I have hope for the future, and I'd like you to be there with me. Bye for now, friend.